If Femi dies while we are still married, everything comes to me as his widow, Saad said, her words cold and calculated. There will be no divorce, no lawyers fighting over percentages. Just a grieving wife and a massive inheritance. It has to look natural. The stress of the business, his blood pressure, no one will suspect anything. We just need to be patient and careful. Hey there, pour a cup of tea, get comfy, and let your heart listen. The story's about to start. Welcome to Tales Vibe, where laughter and lessons flow together. If you love a good story, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe for more tales every week. And please tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to know where our story family is tuning in from. Femi's mansion in Banana Island was a monument to success, but to him, it felt like a graveyard. Built with the finest marble and glass that overlooked the Lagos Lagoon, the house was filled with expensive Italian furniture and gold-plated fixtures. Every morning, Femi woke up to the sound of the water hitting the shore, a billionaire who owned oil blocks, shipping lines, and real estate across the country. To the world, he was a giant of industry. To himself, he was a lonely man living in a house that had no warmth. For 10 years, Femi had been married to Saad. They had started their journey when he was just a struggling businessman with one small office in Ikeja. In those early days, Saad was his rock, the woman who encouraged him and shared his vision. But as the billions started rolling in, the woman he loved began to disappear. The Saad who used to cook his favorite egusi soup was gone, replaced by a woman who only cared about her social standing and the Lagos big girl lifestyle. Saad had become cold and distant. She spent her days in high-end boutiques and her nights at lavish parties where the elite gathered to show off their wealth. Her clothes were always the most expensive designer lace, and her jewelry sparkled more than the stars over the Atlantic. Whenever Femi tried to talk to her about his day or the stress of his business, she would barely look up from her phone. She was always busy replying to comments on her social media pages or planning her next trip to London or Paris. Femi tried everything to bring back the love they once had. He bought her the latest Range Rover, increased her monthly allowance to millions of naira, and took her on vacations to the most expensive islands in the world. But Sada's heart seemed to have turned into stone. She never asked how he was feeling. She only asked when the next wire transfer would hit her account. The intimacy was gone, replaced by a heavy silence that filled the large rooms of their home. Behind the tall gates and the armed security guards, Femi lived a life of quiet desperation. He had all the money in Nigeria, but he had no peace. He began to stay later at the office, dreading the moment he would walk through his front door to meet a wife who treated him like a stranger. He didn't know that while he was busy trying to save his marriage, a much darker shadow was already moving inside his house, waiting for the right moment to strike. The heavy silence in Femi's house finally became too much for Saad to bear alone. She complained that the mansion was too large and that the current staff were not meeting her high standards. She demanded a new housemaid, someone she could train to handle the delicate tasks of the master wing. Femi, hoping that easing her stress might bring back her smile, agreed. He placed a call to a trusted agency, unaware that hundreds of miles away, a young girl's life was falling apart. In a small, dusty village in Benue State, Blessing sat by her mother's bedside. The room smelled of herbs and sickness. Her mother's skin had turned a pale, sickly gray, and her breathing was shallow. The local doctor had been blunt. It was a kidney problem, and without a major operation in a city hospital, she wouldn't survive the year. Blessing's family had sold their small piece of land and their goats, but the money was like a drop of water in the ocean. They were poor, and in Nigeria, poverty can be a death sentence. Blessing was a girl of 20 with a heart of gold and hands that were never idle. She knew she had to leave. With a small bag containing her 2 best Ankara dresses and her mother's prayers, she boarded a night bus to Lagos. The journey was long and grueling. She sat squeezed between market women and loud travelers, staring out the window at the dark forests, wondering if she would ever see her home again. To Blessing, Lagos was a myth, a place where people went to get rich or get lost. When she arrived at the gates of Femi's Banana Island mansion, she felt small. She had never seen a house with its own elevator or grass that stayed green even in the heat of the sun. She was brought before Femi for a brief interview. Femi, tired from a day of board meetings, looked at the young girl standing before him. She didn't wear heavy makeup or expensive hair like the girls he saw in Lagos. Her eyes were clear, humble, and filled with a quiet strength. "Why do you want this job?" Femi asked, his voice weary. Blessing did not look at the floor. She looked him in the eye and spoke the truth. My mother is very sick, sir. I need to work so I can send money home for her surgery. I am a hard worker, and I will treat your house like my own. Something about her sincerity touched Femi. In a world where everyone wanted something from him, this girl just wanted a chance to save her mother. He hired her on the spot. Blessing fell to her knees, whispering, "Thank you, sir," with tears in her eyes. She promised herself that she would be the best maid this house had ever seen. She did not know that her arrival was the first step in a battle for Femi's life. Blessing settled into her duties with a speed that surprised everyone. By her second week, the marble floors of the mansion shone like mirrors, and the scent of fresh lemon and lavender followed her from room to room. She was invisible when she needed to be and efficient when called upon. Femi began to notice that his mornings were smoother, his coffee was always hot, and his gym clothes were perfectly folded. For the first time in a long while, the physical house felt cared for, even if the marriage within it remained broken. However, as Blessing moved quietly through the corridors, she began to notice a pattern that did not sit well with her spirit. Every morning, like clockwork, Femi's black Mercedes would roll out of the compound at 7:30 a.m. as he headed to Victoria Island for business. Not long after the gates closed behind him, a sleek silver car would arrive. The driver was a man named Segan. He was tall, dressed in expensive linen shirts, and carried himself with an air of arrogance that Blessing found unsettling. Saad introduced him to the staff as her favorite cousin from Abadan. She claimed he was in Lagos to look for business opportunities and needed her guidance. But Blessing had grown up in a large family in the village. She knew how cousins related to one another. Cousins talked about family land, elders, and shared memories. They did not sit in the dark corner of the parlor whispering for hours. They did not hold hands under the dining table when they thought the maid was in the kitchen. One afternoon, while Blessing was polishing the banisters of the grand staircase, she looked down and saw Segan pull Saad into a tight embrace. Saad laughed, a sound of genuine joy that she never gave to Femi. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and Segan kissed her forehead in a way that was far from brotherly. Blessing's heart skipped a beat. She quickly pulled back into the shadows, her cloth trembling in her hand. In her village, such a thing was a taboo, a direct insult to the man whose bread they were eating. As the days passed, Segan's visits became bolder. He no longer stayed in the parlor. Saad would lead him to the upstairs private lounge, and sometimes the door would be locked for hours. They would order expensive food from island restaurants, and Saad would tell Blessing to stay in the boys' quarters until she was summoned. Blessing saw the secret smiles and the way their eyes met across the room, eyes filled with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. She realized that while Femi was out in the Lagos heat, fighting to maintain the wealth that funded Sada's life, his wife was bringing another man into the very home he had built for her. Blessing felt a heavy weight in her chest. She was just a maid, a girl from Bainway with a sick mother, but she knew she was witnessing a betrayal that could only end in fire. The weight of the secret Blessing carried made her footsteps heavy as she moved through the mansion. She stayed away from the private lounge whenever Segan was around, but she couldn't stop her ears from hearing or her mind from wondering. She began to notice that the atmosphere in the house was changing. Saad was no longer just distant. She was focused, almost like a hunter waiting for the right moment to pounce. One humid afternoon, the air conditioner in the dining hall began to hum loudly, masking the sound of Blessing's footsteps as she approached the balcony to bring in the cushions before the rain started. Below her, in a secluded corner of the garden where the hibiscus flowers grew thick, she saw Saad and Segan. They were sitting close together on a stone bench, their heads bowed in deep conversation. Blessing froze, crouching behind the ornate railing. "I am tired of this life, Segan." Sada's voice rose, sharp and bitter. 10 years of playing the dutiful wife. 10 years of waiting for Femi to notice me. And for what? I want my freedom. I want to be with you properly, without looking over my shoulder. Then leave him, Segan replied, his voice smooth like oil. Divorce him and let's go to London. Saad hissed, a sound of pure venom. You think it's that easy? Femi is smart. He made me sign a prenuptial agreement before we moved to this island. If I walk away now, I leave with nothing but my clothes. I didn't spend 10 years building this lifestyle to end up back in a flat in Surulere. No, I want the oil blocks. I want the houses in Lekki. I want it all. So, what is the plan? Segan asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. If Femi dies while we are still married, everything comes to me as his widow, Saad said, her words cold and calculated. There will be no divorce, no lawyers fighting over percentages. Just a grieving wife and a massive inheritance. It has to look natural. The stress of the business, his blood pressure, no one will suspect anything. We just need to be patient and careful. Blessing's hands began to shake so violently that she had to grip the railing to keep from falling. She wasn't just hearing about a cousin anymore. She was hearing a plot for a cold-blooded murder. These people were planning to kill a man who had done nothing but provide for them. She felt a wave of nausea hit her. In her village, they taught that the person who knows about a crime but stays silent is as guilty as the one who holds the knife. But who would believe her? She was a girl from Bainway with no shoes, and Saad was a powerful Lagos socialite. As the first drops of rain began to fall, Blessing slipped away, her heart screaming with a fear she had never known. The rain that started in the garden didn't stop for 3 days, matching the gloom that had settled over Blessing's heart. She moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding Sada's eyes. Every time she looked at her mistress, she didn't see a beautiful woman. She saw a predator. She spent her nights praying, asking God for a way out. She thought of her mother's medical bills and the money Femi had already advanced her, and she knew she couldn't just run away. She had to protect the man who was unknowingly funding her mother's life. One morning, while Femi was at a weekend brunch with his business associates, Blessing was tasked with deep cleaning the master suite. As she emptied the small wastebasket near Sada's vanity, she noticed a crumpled piece of paper with a phone number and the word chemist, written in bold ink. Her intuition, sharpened by fear, told her to stay alert. She began to pay closer attention to Sada's movements, watching from the shadows of the hallways. Later that afternoon, Blessing was polishing the silver in the pantry when she heard the kitchen door creak. She ducked behind the large industrial refrigerator. Saad walked in, her heels clicking sharply on the tiles. She wasn't her usual loud self. She was whispering into her phone. "I have it," Saad said into the receiver. "The man from the market said it's perfect. No taste, no smell. It works slowly, like a tired heart giving up. By the time the doctors look at him, they will blame his high blood pressure." Blessing held her breath, her chest tight. Through a gap in the shelving, she saw Saad reach into her expensive leather handbag. She pulled out a small, transparent glass bottle. Inside was a fine, white powder that looked as harmless as powdered sugar. But in the dim light of the kitchen, it looked like crushed bone. Saad held the bottle up, a small, twisted smile playing on her lips. She looked at it with more affection than she had ever shown Femi in the months Blessing had lived there. "Tonight is the night," Saad whispered to herself as she tucked the bottle back into a hidden compartment of her bag. "1 cup of tea, and then I am free." Blessing felt a cold sweat break out across her forehead. The plan was no longer a conversation in the garden. It was a physical reality in a glass bottle. She realized that the white powder was the weapon, and the kitchen was the battlefield. She stayed hidden long after Saad left the room, her mind racing. She was just a girl from the village, but she knew that she was the only thing standing between Femi and his grave. She vowed that no matter what happened to her, that powder would never find its way into Femi's body. The air in the mansion felt thick and heavy, like the atmosphere before a Lagos thunderstorm. Blessing couldn't stop her hands from trembling as she dusted the ornaments in the living room. Every time Saad passed by, clutching her handbag tightly, Blessing felt a chill. The day dragged on, each hour bringing the billionaire closer to a fate he didn't deserve. Blessing knew she couldn't call the police yet. She had no proof other than a small bottle of powder that Saad could easily flush down the toilet. She had to wait for the moment of action. Around 4 p.m., much earlier than usual, the heavy iron gates groaned open. Femi's car pulled into the driveway. When he stepped out, he didn't have his usual firm stride. His tie was loosened, his jacket was draped over his arm, and his face was a mask of exhaustion. The stress of the failed oil deal and the constant pressure of his business empire had finally taken a toll. He looked like a man who was carrying the weight of the whole world on his shoulders. "Femi, you're home early," Saad said, stepping out of the parlor with a fake look of concern. For once, she wasn't on her phone. She walked toward him, her voice sounding sweet and melodic, like a siren leading a ship toward the rocks. "I have a terrible headache, Saad," Femi groaned, rubbing his temples. "My chest feels tight, and my blood pressure is definitely up. I just need to lie down in a dark room." This was the perfect opportunity Saad had been waiting for. Blessing, standing in the shadows of the dining area, saw the spark of excitement in Sada's eyes. a predatory gleam that she tried to hide behind a mask of sympathy. "Oh, my dear, I'm so sorry," Saad cooed, reaching out to touch his arm. "Go upstairs and rest. I will bring you a hot cup of tea myself. It will help you relax and clear your head. Just go and lie down, I'll be there in a moment." Femi nodded weakly, too tired to notice that his wife was suddenly acting like the woman he had married 10 years ago. As he climbed the stairs, Saad turned toward the kitchen, her face instantly hardening. She spotted Blessing standing near the pantry. "Blessing!" Saad snapped, her voice no longer sweet. "The cars in the driveway are covered in dust from the rain. Go outside right now and wash them. Don't come back inside until you have cleaned every single one. Move." It was a setup. Saad wanted her out of the house, so there would be no witnesses to what she was about to do in the kitchen. Blessing bowed her head, saying, "Yes, Ma." But as she walked toward the back door, her mind was spinning. She knew that if she went outside, Femi would be dead before she finished the first car. She stepped out into the humid air, but as soon as the door clicked shut, she dropped her bucket and circled back toward the kitchen window. The evening sun was setting over the lagoon, casting long, orange shadows across the kitchen tiles as Blessing crouched outside the window. She pressed her face against the glass, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Inside, the kitchen was quiet, save for the low whistle of the electric kettle. Saad was standing by the center island, her movements calm and deliberate. She had already placed Femi's favorite ceramic mug, the one with the gold rim he used every evening, on a silver tray. Blessing watched as Saad reached into the hidden pocket of her handbag. Her fingers emerged with the small glass bottle. There was no hesitation in Saada's hands. She unscrewed the cap and tilted it over the steaming mug. The white powder fell like soft snow into the dark tea. It swirled for a second on the surface before disappearing completely into the liquid. Saad took a silver spoon and stirred it slowly, clockwise, then counterclockwise, ensuring every grain of death was dissolved. "Soon," Saad whispered. The word carried through the slightly ajar window, chilling Blessing to her bones. Saad lifted the mug to her nose, smelling the aroma of the tea to ensure the chemical hadn't altered the scent. Satisfied, she wiped a stray drop from the side of the mug with a silk napkin and straightened her dress. She picked up the tray with the grace of a queen, her face shifting back into a mask of fake wifely devotion. She walked out of the kitchen, her high heels clicking a steady rhythm toward the grand staircase. Blessing knew she had seconds. If she ran through the back door, the noise of the heavy metal bolt would alert Saad. She scrambled from her hiding spot, her slippers silent on the grass, and ran to the side entrance of the house that led directly to the servants' stairs. She flew up the back steps, ignoring the burning in her lungs. She had to reach the master bedroom before Femi took the first sip. As she reached the top floor, she saw Saad turning the handle of the master bedroom door. Blessing didn't think about her job, her salary, or the fact that she was a nobody in this big city. She only saw the image of Femi, the man who had spoken to her with respect and helped her mother, lying dead on that expensive bed. Saad entered the room, and Blessing heard her soft, poisonous voice. "Femi, darling, I've brought your tea. Drink it while it's hot. It will make the pain go away." Blessing didn't knock. She didn't wait. She threw her weight against the door and burst into the room just as Femi was reaching for the handle of the mug. The door hit the wall with a thunderous bang that shattered the quiet of the master bedroom. Femi jumped, his fingers jerking away from the gold-rimmed mug just as they were about to wrap around the handle. Saad spun around, the silver tray wobbling in her hands, her face contorting from a mask of fake sweetness into a snarl of pure rage. For a heartbeat, the room was frozen. The billionaire in his bed, the wife with her poison, and the village girl standing in the doorway, gasping for air. "Don't drink Am. Oga begged, don't drink that tea." Blessing's voice tore through the room, a raw, desperate sound that carried the weight of her Baneway upbringing and her fear for Femi's life. She moved into the room, her chest heaving, her eyes fixed on the tray. "Oga, please. No drink mo." "Madam, Don put something for inside." Femi looked from Blessing to his wife, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Blessing? What is the meaning of this? Why are you shouting like a mad person?" Before Blessing could answer, Saad found her voice. It came out like the crack of a whip. "You useless, smelling village girl. How dare you burst into my bedroom like this? Have you lost your mind?" She turned to Femi, her voice trembling with a calculated mix of anger and offense. "Femi, can you see this? This is what happens when you bring people from the bush into a civilized home." She has gone completely insane. Get out of here now before I call the police to drag you to the station. I no be craze Oga. Blessing cried, tears finally breaking free and running down her dusty cheeks. I see him with my 2 eyes. For the kitchen. She carry small bottle from her bag. She pour the white powder for inside the tea. She stir am Oga. She wait make he melt finish before she bring him come here. I swear to God who made me, Oga, if you drink that tea, you no go wake up again. Sada's face went from red to a deathly, ashen gray. She tried to step toward Femi, pushing the tray closer to him. Femi, don't listen to her. She's jealous. She's been looking at you with evil eyes since she got here. She wants to destroy our peace. Drink your tea, darling. Let's ignore this animal. But Femi was no longer the tired, sick man he had been minutes ago. The billionaire who had survived the cutthroat streets of Lagos business was waking up. He looked at the tray, then at Sada's shaking hands. He saw a single drop of sweat roll down her forehead. He looked at Blessing, whose entire body was vibrating with the sincerity of someone who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Sod, Femi said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous vibration. Set the tray down on the nightstand. Now. The silver tray clattered onto the mahogany nightstand as Sada's strength failed her. The tea sloshed over the rim, staining the white lace doily, but Femi didn't take his eyes off his wife. The silence in the room was heavier than the humid Lagos air outside. Femi stood up slowly from the bed. He was no longer the exhausted husband. He was the chairman, the man who could spot a lie in a boardroom from a mile away. Femi, please, Sod whispered, her voice cracking. You cannot believe this girl over me. 10 years, Femi. 10 years of marriage. Why would I do such a thing? If it is just tea, Sod, Femi said, his voice cold and steady. Then drink it. Show me that our maid is lying. Drink the cup you prepared for me with so much love. Sod looked at the dark liquid. She took a half step back, her eyes darting toward the door, but Blessing was still standing there, blocking the exit. Sada's breathing became ragged. I don't like tea when it's cold. And I am offended that you would even ask me to prove myself like this. It is an insult. The only insult here is your acting, Femi snapped. He turned to Blessing. Where is the bottle she used? Inside her bag, Oga. The small leather one she carry enter kitchen. E still day inside, Blessing replied, her voice firm despite the tears. Femi reached for Sada's Gucci handbag, sitting on the vanity. Sod screamed and lunged for it, her fingernails clawing at his arm. But Femi pushed her aside with a strength born of pure heartbreak. He turned the bag upside down, dumping the contents onto the bed. Gold lipsticks, a diamond-encrusted phone, and bundles of high-denomination Naira notes spilled out. And then, rolling out from a hidden inner pocket, came the small glass bottle. Femi picked it up. It was empty, save for a few grains of white dust clinging to the bottom. At that moment, the bedroom door opened again. It was the head of security, a retired police officer named Musa, whom Femi had secretly messaged the moment the shouting started. Musa, take this bottle and this cup, Femi commanded, his hand shaking with suppressed rage. Call Dr. Okon. Tell him to meet you at his private lab immediately. I want to know exactly what is in this tea. Seeing the bottle in Femi's hand, Sada's legs gave way. She collapsed onto the marble floor, her expensive lace dress fanning out around her. The Lagos big girl was gone. In her place was a broken woman who had been caught in the ultimate betrayal. It was Segan, she wailed, clutching Femi's feet. He put the idea in my head. He said we could be happy. Femi, please, I was confused. Please don't call the police. Femi looked down at her with a disgust so deep it felt like a physical weight. He didn't see the woman he had married. He saw a stranger who had tried to end his life for oil blocks and bank balances. He stepped back, pulling his feet away from her grasp. Musa, Femi said, staring at the ceiling to keep his own tears from falling. Lock her in the guest room. Call the DPO at the Morocco police station. Tell them to send a van. And find out where cousin Segan is staying. I want both of them. The blue and red lights of the police van flashed against the white walls of the mansion, casting a rhythmic glow that signaled the end of an era. Femi stood on the balcony, watching in silence as the officers led Sod away. She was no longer shouting. Her head was bowed, her hands cuffed, and the heavy designer lace she wore seemed to weigh her down like lead. Minutes later, a second call came in. Moose's team had intercepted Segan at a luxury hotel in Lekki, packing a bag to flee. The betrayal was complete, and justice had begun its work. The house was finally quiet, but the silence was different now. It was no longer the cold, suffocating silence of a broken marriage. It was the stillness that follows a great storm. Femi turned away from the window and walked back into the living room. His headache had vanished, replaced by a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He saw Blessing standing by the dining table, her head bowed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She looked exhausted, her simple clothes wrinkled from the night's chaos. "Blessing," Femi said softly. She looked up, her eyes still red from crying. "Yes, Oga?" "Aye. I'll go pack my things now. I know say I disturbed the house too much today. I go find another work." Femi walked toward her and shook his head. "Pack your things?" "Blessing, you are not going anywhere. If not for you, I would be in a morgue right now while they plan my funeral. You saved my life when the person I trusted most tried to take it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, making a quick call to his personal assistant. "I want the best medical team at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital ready tonight. We are moving a patient from Bainway by ambulance immediately. Every cost, every surgery, every post-op care, charge it to my private account. And I want a flat kept ready for her family near the hospital." Blessing gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oga, my mama? You go help my mama?" "It is the least I can do," Femi replied, a small, genuine smile finally touching his face. "Your mother raised a daughter with a lion's heart and the spirit of truth. Nigeria needs more people like you." Femi didn't just stop at the medical bills. He ensured Blessing was enrolled in a top university to study the nursing degree she had always dreamed of, moving her from the maid's quarters into a comfortable guest wing as a member of the family. The billionaire's burden had been lifted, replaced by a new purpose. He realized that true wealth wasn't in oil blocks or Banana Island mansions, but in the loyalty of a pure soul. As the sun began to rise over the Lagos lagoon, marking a new day, the billionaire and the village girl stood together, not as master and servant, but as two people bound by a debt of life and a brand new beginning. And that's the end of today's tale. We hope it brought a smile, a thought, or a little bit of magic to your day. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to Tales Vibe for more weekly tales, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our story family all around the world. Until next time, keep your heart open, your imagination alive, and remember, laughter and lessons always go hand in hand. See you in the next story.